Hi everybody and welcome back to my little YouTube channel. As you can see, it's extremely snowy in Buxton in Derbyshire. It's really deep, and when I say deep, I mean where I live here it's knee level deep, so it's extremely deep. So I'm absolutely covered in snow and I've got nice rosy cheeks, and if my nose runs I do apologise, I can't help it, it's so cold. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider hitting the like, commenting and subscription button, and also if you're a returning viewer and you haven't subscribed, don't forget to hit the subscribe button because it is free. So just to give you an idea of how deep the snow is, this isn't even as deep as it gets. It's really deep snow in Buxton. It gets really heavy snowfall every year, and this is the first day that I've been able to come out and vlog because it's dry and it's pretty sunny, but I'm hoping that I don't sink anywhere in any little holes that I miss that are filled with snow. So if you don't hear from me again, you can assume that I've been swallowed up by snow in the ground. But in today's video I want to discuss more autism, and I actually want to talk about my employment as an autistic person, a little bit of a personal journey really. I worked in the National Health Service for nearly 20 years and I hit burnout and I hit some problems, and I want to discuss about employment and autism. So if you're interested in hearing about my little story, stay tuned. So if you're new to this channel or you're just tuning in, my name's Amanda. I'm a diagnosed autistic adult. I was diagnosed a few years ago. I've been to 2 universities. The first university I've got my degree in a medical profession, which I'm not going to say for privacy reasons, that I work at now. And I also went then to medical school, and I'll go into that a little bit in a bit more detail in this video. But in both scenarios I hit problems. I managed to qualify my first degree, but when I went out of that and went to study medicine on the MBCHB course, I didn't have long to go until I would have qualified as a doctor, but I hit a lot of interpersonal problems, which I'll talk about in a bit. So although sometimes it can look that especially autistic women are coping well in our lives, a lot of the time we're doing something called autistic camouflaging or autistic masking. And so we can be doing incredibly hard, we can be suffering badly, and people aren't aware of it because a lot of the time we hide those feelings of anxiety and depression from other people. So what you see of us might not always represent the true picture, and indeed that's what I've been through all my life, feeling like this alien on a foreign planet, on a neurotypical planet, and feeling like I just don't fit in. And as a result of that, I've been working incredibly hard, like autistic people do, in school and then at college and at university. We work so much harder than neurotypical people in general because we're having to not only learn things the way neurotypical people learn them, but we're having to deal with the social nuances and the body language and socialising and communication and all that stuff in order to be accepted in a neurotypical world. So we really, when we go out every day as autistic people, we're putting in a massive amount of effort in comparison to people that don't have autism. So what it might look like we're okay to other people, we're actually working twice as hard. And of course we get the same amount of time off, annual leave or time in lieu, as neurotypical people, but that may not be enough to replenish us as autistic people. We might need double the amount. Now of course that's obviously never going to be allowed in a workplace or a college or whatever environment because it's favouring one person over another. But the time off that autistic people get usually just isn't enough to replenish our batteries that have just been worn down and ground down over the years, and so it results in interpersonal problems and problems with us relating to the world around us, and it leads to us feeling feelings of resentment because we've maybe tried so hard and we've been rejected or pushed away, pushed back from people, friendships, jobs, all that sort of stuff, and it leads to feelings of anger, resentment, and we can ruminate and worry, and that's something for another video, rumination. But all these accumulative things for an autistic person in our daily living while we might look okay to others, it leads to exhaustion, because you can only keep up acting or masking, camouflaging for so long. You can only keep working twice as hard as everybody else for so long. You can only keep grinding for so long. You can only be rejected so much. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so eventually our batteries wear down. You might have heard of the social battery concept with autism. It's where we look at a battery model and we say, what activities can I do today that's going to replenish my battery? What activities are going to deplete my battery? And trying to maintain a fine balance. Now, most of the time, work and college environments, they just drain our battery, and there's just no way of replenishing that, especially if you're working in a full-time job, for example. And then having other people to understand autism and put reasonable adjustments in, that's for another video. A lot of autistic people don't get reasonable adjustments, and so they're having to work alongside neurotypical peers, and they're working twice as hard, and at the end of the day it is absolutely exhausting. And that's exactly what happened to me, which I'll go into in more detail in this video. So I've said it in one of my previous videos, I think when I first started to realise that I was different to other people, I felt different to everybody else around me, was when I was doing my GCSEs. It's the time where I was expected to mingle in social groups and work together. You know, the teachers would put you in teams and you'd be expected to coagulate in those teams and work together, and it's something that I found really challenging at the time. Understanding other people and the social cliques, not understanding when people was being sarcastic and getting bullied as a result. And check out my other video, it's called My Life is Fake. I'll leave a link in the description here or in the comments below, check it out. That's when I first started realising that I felt different to everybody else around me. And I started to learn masking, to learn how to cope in that situation. It's masking and camouflaging it's an autistic person's survival mechanism in a neurotypical world, and it's something that we do. We act like I'm doing now. I'm acting for this camera and I'm doing it so I fit in the world, so I'm accepted, so I can get subscribers, so I don't come across as being autistic. And boys and girls with autism, we all do it to some extent. It's just that girls tend to do it more, and that's because of the social female clique, and I don't mean any offence by that. But we do these things, and it's absolutely mentally draining when we're doing it on a long-term basis. So it started off when I was doing my GCSEs, and then my A-levels, where I couldn't look people in the eyes. I used to look down, and I used to get picked on and bullied because people thought that there was something different about me. And I started feeling like I wasn't worthy because I wasn't making friends. I wasn't clicking with the social group. I was being bullied and picked on and rejected. I didn't have boyfriends, I didn't have a best friend, and all these things sort of took their toll on me when I was younger, and I developed an eating disorder. And I think that was sort of my way of gaining some control back in my life, and that's in my other video. But I'm telling you this just to build up a story with regards to my employment. I remember going to we did work experience training as part of our GCSEs in the job that I'm in now, actually, and feeling, what is the point in me being here doing this now, because I'm never going to make it, I'm not good enough. And it was that time when all this anxiety and these depressive thoughts and feelings and these worrying ruminations was plaguing me day and night, feeling like I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good enough. You know, it doesn't help sometimes when you have family and friends that aren't supportive of you, and I know that not everybody has a supportive family and friend network. So sometimes we can be going through all of that, and then on top of that we can be not supported or misunderstood by those people around us that are supposed to love and care for us. So it can really lead to sort of post-traumatic stress for a lot of autistic people, and that can carry with us throughout our entire lives. And I felt like I wasn't good enough. I ended up getting through to my A-levels, and I ended up being accepted into the university, and that was fantastic. The university was amazing, the University of Huddersfield. I can recommend going there for any of the health courses. It's just the most wonderful place, the most wonderful supportive university for autism in my experience. Even though they didn't know it was autism then, it was just fantastic. And then I qualified, and what happened was I finished work on the Friday. I finished university on the Friday, and I started employment on the Monday, and I'll go into that a bit more now. So when I started my job in the National Health Service, like I say, I literally had 2 days off over the weekend after finishing at university, which on retrospect probably wasn't enough, because I'd worked twice as hard as everybody else, studying and training, and then I didn't have any time off to replenish my batteries. And then adding on to that, I actually went into the top of my pay band. So I was in a senior role position from freshly coming out of university. Now the rules and everything have changed now, whereas you're not allowed to be promoted to a senior role. You have to go through specific pathways, specific banding in healthcare roles to get to a specific place. Well, I passed through all of those roles, and I went to the top of my band, and so I was expected to see sort of 20 patients a day, sometimes more, and it was one after the other. Sometimes I would have 10 minutes per patient. The maximum was 20 minutes per patient at the time, and we used to get sort of a half an hour lunch break, and so it was that repetitive. I went from being a student to that repetitive one after the other cycle of almost, I used to call it a conveyor belt of patients. And what I mean by that is not a conveyor belt in terms of the health service, but a conveyor belt of me having to mask and put on the same conversation for every patient. 20 patients, one after the other. I literally, most of the time I missed my lunch break. I was running late after work. I just had no time to myself, and so I was having to make the same conversation, the same small talk with patients and then colleagues on top of that every single day. And I did that for 20 years, and I worked my way up to, because you've got different banding levels. Although I was at the top of that band, others then went on to different bands to get to the top, to the next level. And I started to hit burnout. Nearly 20 years I worked for the health service, and then I watched a programme on BBC News, this lady that had autism, and I said to my dad, I can understand her. I feel like I also have autism. I had social anxiety, I was masking, I didn't like eye contact, and all of the symptoms and signs that go along with autism. I felt socially awkward, I felt like I didn't fit in and all that. Food aversions and sensory aversions and everything that goes along with autism. And so I told my employer, because I was starting to feel, not angry is not the right word, I was starting to feel depressed, anxious, down, like I wasn't getting any time for myself. Imagine working and not having time off and not having time to replenish your batteries, and eventually you're going to get exhausted. It's like torture. It's like torture for an autistic person, not being able to have time to replenish our batteries. And of course I was working, don't forget, seeing 20 patients to me as an autistic person is equivalent to seeing 40 patients to me in comparison to my colleagues seeing 20, because I was working twice as hard as my colleagues. You know, they was neurotypical and I'm autistic, so for every patient I'm working twice as hard and putting twice as much effort in, which everybody else around me couldn't see because I was masking. They didn't know. And then I started saying that I think that I might be autistic. I feel like I might have autism, and I went to my doctors. My doctor referred me, and I had a 3-year waiting list for an autism assessment. And the health service, because they wanted to put reasonable adjustments in place. Reasonable adjustments are things that are put in place in order to help an autistic person to perform better at their job, or not better, to perform the same as at their job, in comparison to somebody that doesn't have autism, so a neurotypical person. So there's like equality there. So I had to have a provisional autism assessment in the National Health Service with the occupational health advisor, who then confirmed that it scored highly as autism. And unfortunately, I mean, it's different for everybody. I know a lot of employers are inclusive, but it wasn't so much for me, because once I'd told everybody that I had suspected autism, I was told by the occupational health advisor that bearing in mind that I'd progressed to the top of my pay band and I'd gone from university to the top of to a senior position, when I was diagnosed as autistic, I was told, and my dad was sat next to me at the time, that I would never progress any further in my career because of my autism, which baffled me a little bit, because I'd also been to medical school and I'd built my way up to the top of my band, and then I was told that I would never progress. And so autistic people, we face those barriers and those worries about informing employers about our autism or anxiety or depression or whatever. And people say you should inform people and you'll get help. It's not always the case, because sometimes we can face discrimination. And so if you're in this scenario now where you're considering telling your employee, think about it first. I would advise to inform people so that you can understand yourself better and you can get supports put in place. But just think about it first. Obviously my story is going to be different to your story, and my outcome is going to be different to your outcome. But after I declared my autism, people didn't really understand me, and it didn't really go too well. So we'll just backtrack a little bit to when I went to medical school. So I left the university on the Friday and I went to work in the NHS on the Monday, and I worked for a couple of years, 2 years, in the health service at the top of my professional band in a senior role, working with high-risk patients, high-risk diabetic patients, patients that were quite poorly, and dealing with all that, which was fine. But then I decided that I wanted to be a doctor. I love to study. The academic side for autistic people is sometimes really strong in comparison to the practical side, and so that was the case for me. My academic side is better than my practical side. In some cases, not always, because I do struggle with understanding and interpreting and all of that, but that's for another video. But for things like science and biology and pharmacy, I loved my pharmacy. I did my pharmacy in the NHS and prescription-only medicines and everything. Is things like autistic people really enjoy, the chemistry side of it, and things like subjects like that. And I wanted to train to be a doctor, so I applied to go to Leicester School of Medicine on the MBCHB course, and I got accepted. I was really awkward during the interview. I didn't think I'd get in. I had the most horrendous anxiety. At the time, obviously, we didn't know that I was autistic, so I wasn't able to tell them, probably a good thing, which I'll come on to in a bit. I wasn't able to tell them I was autistic. I feel that if I did at the time, I probably wouldn't have been accepted into medical school. But I got into medical school and I didn't have long to go until I would have qualified as a doctor. But unfortunately, again, I loved the academic side of it, but I started hitting problems with the social side of it. And whereas the University of Huddersfield was really supportive of me, I didn't feel that from the University of Leicester. I actually came forward and said I'm having problems. I went to my doctor and to occupational health, and I said I'm having problems with interpersonal skills. I was on an oncology ward, cancer ward for a year. And although I could mask my way through it and had pre-script conversations, what looked like a normal conversation to everybody else, like I'm talking to you now, I would pre-script it in my mind beforehand. So it came across that I was coherent and a good communicator. But the reality of it is pre-scripted, like this video. And I told them that I was having interpersonal skills, interpersonal skill problems, mingling in groups and being expected to go out socialising. and formed social clubs and everything. And unfortunately it didn't go down too well for me, and it all seemed to go against me after that. And I came out of medical school and I came back into the National Health Service, and again went straight back into my senior position and worked my way up then to working with real just high risk patients. And so you can imagine how difficult that was. Although people might think, oh, she's been to medical school, she's done this, she's capable. I've been working twice as hard as neurotypical people all my life, and it's because I've been rejected, and a lot of autistic people get rejected in life because I've tried harder than most people, have been pushed back by society, because I've been excluded, discriminated against, which a lot of autistic people face. I'm not saying I'm a victim. Obviously, I'm a difficult person to deal with sometimes because I have autism, and that comes with its challenges. So there's two sides to every story, is what I'm saying. It's not all one-sided. There's two sides to this story. So I'm sure my university and my employers will have their side to put to it as well. You know, I'm not a victim. I'm not an innocent person. I have suffered meltdowns and all sorts when I was in the NHS, and that I'll go into a little bit. This video is probably going to be a little bit longer in length, but I want to just show you that you're not on your own. If you're autistic and you're struggling with employment, sometimes even though you're grafted for years and years and you're pushed and you work your way up, it can all come crashing down on us because we just can't sustain that level of hard work for a lifetime, for an eternity. It's impossible. And that's what happened to me, which I'll go into now. So working in the National Health Service and working with large groups of people is probably the same in fire services, in police forces, in other government jobs. You're expected to be able to do something called multi-professional working or interprofessional working, interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary team working, and that means you're expected to work by yourself, and you're also expected to work alongside other people, and you're expected to work alongside other people as part of your own department and as part of other departments. So nurses and consultants, you know, a lot of the time I was on a surgical ward and I was working alongside consultants. I was doing the pre-operative and post-operative surgical assessments, and so I was expected to mingle in these big groups, and that was okay for the first half of my career because I was masking. But what I didn't realise was, as I was masking, and we do that to benefit other people so that we fit in and other people aren't feeling awkward around us, really. In my opinion, that's why we mask, and to be promoted and not be discriminated against. But we do it so that other people accept us. But what I didn't realise at the time, and what a lot of autistic people don't realise, is that when we're acting, when we're smiling, when we're telling a joke, when we're laughing, when we feel sad and depressed, even like people with depression do that, we are taking a toll on our own mental health and well-being. So every day that we go out to a work environment, every day that I went out into that surgical environment, every day I went out to my clinical environment, every day I went out to that multidisciplinary environment, it was taking a toll on my own mental well-being. It was chipping away. It was chipping, and I was getting tired and more tired and exhausted. I started to feel a little bit of resentment, not resentment in a negative, horrible way, but resentment that I felt like I was different to everybody else, like I was not fit to do the job, like I was tired, I was exhausted, and it was really depleting my physical and mental energy. And that can happen with autistic people working in a job when we don't have reasonable adjustments put in place. And just think how many of us are undiagnosed. You might be watching this and you might be autistic, but you might not know it. and you might have worked all your life. I don't know how old you are, but you might have worked, or you might be in university or whatever. But a lot of autistic people, we've worked all our lives without even knowing that we've got autism. And so we haven't had reasonable adjustments put in place to try and support us in the workplace. And so we've worked incredibly hard, much harder than most other people, to try and succeed and get through. And so if you're feeling absolutely exhausted, like you can't do it anymore, then I want you to know that is a normal feeling. You're probably absolutely exhausted, and you're certainly not on your own. And so I had my autism assessment a few years ago, had my provisional assessment in the National Health Service, which said that I was autistic, but I'll never progress any further in my career. And it was all pretty much downhill after that. I asked for certain reasonable adjustments to be put in place, and a lot of the things that I'd asked for, which were free and simple to put in place, didn't go to plan. And so I continued to struggle. People didn't understand why when my mask dropped and I started being myself, people didn't know why I'd changed, and they would say things like, why are you quiet, why are you withdrawn? And even though I explained that I'm autistic and I'm tired, I was expected to put on this performance every day and continue masking. People just didn't understand why my personality had changed so much. And I think that's a lot of the time we can face those challenges when our autistic mask drops, and people have known us as acting for so long. And especially in my case, when I told people that I was autistic, managers just didn't understand me. Now, like I say, I'm not trying to say that I'm this perfect person, this perfect employee, because I'm certainly not. And during my career, especially once I told people that I was autistic, I was experiencing more meltdowns because I was going through just exhaustion. And it was challenging for my employer knowing how to deal with those meltdowns. And that's why it's so important for employers to know how to deal with autistic employees and strategies to calm them. And in my case, when I'd have a meltdown, and usually that was as a result of something that had changed or confrontation. You know, I don't like confrontation in general. And so if I was confronted by a member of staff about something, I would feel like it was negative and I'd done something wrong. And autistic people, we don't like that feeling that we've done something wrong. And so it would lead me to ruminations and rumbling, and then I'd have a massive meltdown. And the managers, just as much as on paper they like to think that they're autistic aware, they just wasn't. And although in my reasonable adjustments passport I'd put that if I have a meltdown, just leave me for half an hour, whatever, I'll go in a quiet room and then I can be fine to carry on with my day. That rarely didn't happen often. And I was sent home and told that I was a risk to myself and others, even though I wasn't. And that made me feel worse, and it made me feel guilty, and it made me feel like a bad person. And these are the things that autistic people can face in employment. So although we can build our way up and we can do really well academically, sometimes the socialising and the practical side of it can be extremely challenging for us, and we can fall short of obtaining positions because of the deficiencies we have in these areas. And obviously it's important for managers and employers to understand autism, but that's what I'm hoping with these videos anyway. I'm hoping to help potential managers and employers. What's happened to me has happened to me. It's in the past. I ended up putting a grievance in because I'd had problems at work with, in my opinion, I'd been not treated very well. And grievances came back as no evidence. You know, I was told I'd be sidelined and all this sort of stuff. Came back, there was no evidence, as grievances do, because obviously departments want to protect themselves, don't they? And on retrospect, I suppose a grievance isn't the best way to go about trying to resolve conflict or trying to resolve problems. It just makes the other person feel angry or annoyed or resentful of you, and so it can make the situation worse. I'm sure looking back now there's probably more amicable ways that things can be sorted, but at the time when you're autistic and you're going through burnout, which I was going through my first stages of autistic burnout, and so I wasn't running on much energy, and so everything that was asked of me was depleting me that little bit more. And so at the time things probably felt even much worse than they was, although they was bad, but trying to make a positive out of a negative situation. Autistic people can face discrimination in employment, and it has given me post-traumatic stress. It's given me very bad anxiety. When I used to get emails in at work, it used to usually be something I'd done wrong and it was negative. I won't answer the phone now even. I won't answer my door, I won't answer emails, because I feel like when I get an email or something, it's going to be negative. So as a result, it's given me post-traumatic stress. And I think post-traumatic stress is something that isn't really diagnosed with autistic people. And I think a lot of autistic people can suffer from that from past trauma in their younger or older lives, and it can result in post-traumatic stress, and that can have not long-term effects on our mental health. And of course then it stops us from gaining more meaningful employment, because we have all of this negative energy, this rumination, this worry, this anxiety surrounding rejection from the past and things that have happened in the past, and it can stop us from pushing forward. And I went through burnout. I left, I walked out through no fault of my own. I went off with anxiety, having had a meltdown. I was told I was a risk to myself and others. Reasonable adjustments wasn't followed, and I went off as a result. I was told to go home, and what happens with me is if I go home, I don't tend to want to come back because of anxiety. So I went off with anxiety, and I wanted to go back into work, but the manager wouldn't let me. He wanted to sit in with my occupational health appointment, which is a one-to-one confidential appointment, and eyeball me and gauge my reaction, which, as you know, autistic people, we don't like being eyeballed. And so I refused to do that. I said I would go if it was a one-to-one with occupational health, but I won't go if you're sat in there with me, because it's private. And I wasn't allowed to go back to work unless I was allowing my manager to sit into my private medical examination. The unions that I was with at the time sided with my employer, and as a result I couldn't take it anymore. I hit massive burnout, and I left. And I can't remember much after that, to be honest. I hit such bad burnout, it's like my mind detached from my body. And I lost basic life skills, and I lost everything on that day. And my life has never been the same since. And my anxiety is unbelievably bad. And it might come across that I'm confident with these videos, but I'm not. My anxiety is hideous, it's awful. Although I do act, and you might think that I'm okay, I'm not. And that is the case for a lot of autistic people. And so I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope if you're autistic or you think you're autistic and you've always wondered why you've struggled so much in employment, now you might know that you're not on your own. I've been there, lots of autistic people, we've all been there. Forgive yourself, because you're working so much harder than people that don't have autism. And a lot of the time we go through our entire lives without even knowing we're autistic. We put so much pressure on ourselves, and we don't get reasonable adjustments put in place because we don't know that we're autistic. And so it's exhausting for us. And so I want you to be a little bit kinder on yourself today if you're watching this video, and know that, you know what, you're just perfect just the way you are, and you've been put on this planet for a reason. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider hitting like, commenting and subscribing, and I shall see you next time when it's not snowing.